Welcome to the N1 Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Sadu, and in this episode, we're going to be chatting about the immune system, how it works, and what to do in order to optimize its function. I thought this would be an especially useful episode right now due to the COVID-19 situation, of course, but it's always applicable because our immune systems are working behind the scenes for us 24/7. So let's dig into how this thing actually works. Simply put, the immune system is a network of cells and proteins that defend the body against infection. Now, one of the coolest things that it does is that it keeps a record of every single germ it has ever come in contact with. So it can recognize and destroy it quickly if it ever enters the body again. So your immune system actually has a memory. It's pretty amazing. There are a few different branches of the immune system, but for the sake of this episode, I'm just going to talk more generally because you don't need to know all the details and intricacies of each branch in order to understand how the system works as a whole. Now, one interesting aside to note on viruses, pathogens, germs, etc., is that for the most part, they don't want to kill you. That may sound odd, but I'll explain. Viruses, like us, want to reproduce and get as far into the future as possible. And so if they kill us, especially if they kill us quickly, they're a lot less likely to do that because if we're dead, we can't spread the virus to other hosts who spread it to other hosts. So let's take the coronavirus, for example. As of this recording on Saturday, May 9th, 98% of the current cases worldwide have mild to no symptoms at all, and 2% are serious or critical. The milder the symptoms are of a given virus, typically the more effectively it spreads because the host, us as people, are still able to walk around and spread the virus to more folks, especially if we don't even know we have it. On the contrary, if you're bedbound with zero energy and not able to move a muscle because of the harsh symptoms of a virus, it's much less likely to spread because you're not physically coming in contact with nearly as many folks if you're immobile. I wanted to mention that just because I think it's fascinating from an evolutionary biology perspective because everything that's essentially alive on Earth, viruses included, are adapting on the fly and making it as likely as possible to get into the future. But back to the immune system. It has an amazing memory and it's incredibly diligent. Now, understanding how the immune system works as a whole is actually quite simple because it's just like budgeting your finances. So let's say you have $4,000 to spend per month, so $1,000 per week. If you're carrying excess weight, that's going to be more expensive than being of a healthful body weight. If you're eating poorly, that's going to cost you more than eating well because your body needs to allocate resources to deal with those funky foods. If you're not moving enough, that's a cost. If you're not sleeping enough, that's another cost. Light exposure, sun exposure, mental stressors, emotional stressors, social connection, all of these things add up. Alcohol and drug intake, these are two factors that suppress the immune system that everyone is aware of. So essentially, if you don't provide your body with something it needs to function optimally, it's going to eat into your budget a lot more than if you had provided yourself with it. You have $1,000 per week to spend, but as soon as that money is gone and you dip into the red, it's extremely likely that you're going to get some sort of ailment. This is exactly why healthier people get sick far less often than not so healthy people. You can think about it like this. Healthy people have health savings accounts, essentially, and unhealthy people are living paycheck to paycheck. So as soon as one unexpected expense comes up, less healthy folks get sick, whereas healthy people have backup funds in their savings accounts to allocate toward fighting off a cold, for example. So taking really good care of yourself doesn't actually provide you with a bigger budget. It just means that you're spending your money far more effectively. So for example, eating healthfully is far less expensive than eating poorly when you look at it from the perspective of the immune system. The same goes for movement. Not moving enough is far more expensive than moving your body adequately, and getting proper sleep is far more affordable than missing out on sleep. Now, a quick little myth to bust here. Approaching things from this angle completely squashes the eating healthy is expensive fallacy. Because when folks say this, They're solely looking at how much money something costs up front, but they're completely neglecting the downstream effects. For example, in the US in 2017, they spent $327 billion on diabetes and related treatments, and that's in a year. Now, in the case of type 2 diabetes specifically, it doesn't develop overnight. It takes time to fully manifest, but in the big scheme of things, it's far more expensive than purchasing healthful food, not to mention the quality of life cost. That's another biggie, right? But the take home there is it's a pay now or pay later with interest situation, because type 2 diabetes, for example, is 100% avoidable because you're not born with it. It's a lifestyle disease. So I just wanted to touch on that quickly. Now, I'm sure you've had the experience of feeling like you're on the verge of getting sick, but you decide to go to that social gathering or party anyway. You have a couple drinks, and then the next day you wake up and you're full-on couch-bound. This is an example of being right on the edge of your budget and then going out that night pushing you over the edge. So if you had stayed home, ate well, slept well, and just rested, it's highly likely that you would have been able to recover. But because you were toting that line so closely, even a tame night could have put you into a hole in terms of immune function. We all like the feeling of having some cushion in our bank accounts, and a healthy lifestyle provides you with the biggest cushion possible from an immune health standpoint. Now, what about autoimmune conditions? This is something that's super close to my heart because just about every woman in my family on both sides has had or has an autoimmune condition. So this is something that I care about a lot. Now, generally speaking, an autoimmune condition is when your immune system can't determine good cells from bad cells, and so it attacks them both. It's just like friendly fire in war. It's almost like someone isn't able to see the difference between the uniforms of either side, and so they just shoot everyone. Examples of AI conditions are type 1 diabetes, MS, Crohn's, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and Hashimoto's, just to name a few. Now, there are really varying degrees of autoimmune conditions, meaning one person could have MS and live a full life, while for other folks it could be fatal. So there's massive variance here. However, in general, folks with autoimmune conditions are starting with a smaller budget. So they may be working with $3,000 per month and $750 per week. So folks with AI conditions have to be more diligent with their lifestyle habits because they're working with a smaller budget from the get-go. Now, I'm going to put a whole podcast together on autoimmune conditions and how to manage them from a nutrition and lifestyle standpoint, but the take-home on AI conditions is you've got less wiggle room than other folks do when it comes to staying healthy. It sucks, but it is what it is. Now let's look at the immune system budget concept in correlation with the flu. There are a lot of deaths attributed to the flu or complications from the flu each year. It's actually anywhere from 290,000 to 650,000 people yearly. That's a really wide range, but those are the numbers. However, they are sort of misleading because we know that underlying conditions like heart disease, autoimmune conditions, obesity, etc. have worse outcomes when it comes to contracting the flu. And this is because, like we talked about before, these folks are working with smaller budgets. Like that one party example that pushed you over the edge and got you sick when you felt like you were teetering on that border, the same thing is happening in a lot of cases with the flu. The immune system is essentially maxed out. There are no more funds or resources available to deal with anything else. So the flu is pushing a lot of these people over the edge, and unfortunately they're dying. Now, was it solely the party that got you sick? No, you felt it coming on beforehand, but that one night out was the straw that broke the camel's back. So in the same vein, it looks like the flu is responsible for a massive number of deaths each year. But health doesn't occur in a vacuum, so you've got to look at the complete picture because 3 to 5 million people get the flu yearly, meaning the vast majority of them shrug it off and recover. Now, I want to be clear that I'm not downplaying the seasonal flu and saying that it's completely harmless or anything like that. What I'm pointing out is that we can't look at things like this in isolation, and that's why I wanted to put this episode together on the immune system as a big picture concept. So now let's get into the practical takeaways part. How do you set yourself up to have the healthiest immune function possible? First thing is nutrition. Single and minimal ingredient whole foods that you cook yourself. When you're eating great, your immune system doesn't have to allocate resources to buffer funky foods your body doesn't deal with well. It's sort of like putting gasoline in a diesel car. Sure, it'll work, but it's not the appropriate fuel, and it's going to break down a lot sooner versus had you put in the appropriate fuel source in the tank. On the movement front, 8 to 10K steps per day is a baseline movement must, in my opinion. If you want to work out on top of that, that's great. It's a bonus, but workouts do not replace steps. Steps are like showing up to work and doing your job, and workouts are like putting in overtime hours. Sleep-wise, 7 to 9 hours nightly, and that actually doesn't mean if you need 7 hours, you spend 7 hours in bed. You want to give yourself a bit of a buffer because nobody falls asleep the second their head hits the pillow, right? So if you need 7 hours, give yourself at least 7.5 hours of time in bed with the lights out. Stress management, I've said this before, but when you've got your nutrition, movement, and sleep dialed in, the need for stress management strategies reduces drastically. But things like meditation can be great, reading, running a bath, cooking, just sitting and doing nothing, thinking, chatting with friends, writing, and the list goes on. There are 1,000,001 things here, and it's going to depend on the individual and what works for you. Supplements, you can take supplements if you'd like. Personally, I don't take any. I just focus on the big rocks, i.e. nutrition, movement, sleep, and stress management. I'm not crazy about supplementing with vitamin C year round or anything like that. I'd prefer folks get a full array of vitamins and minerals from whole foods, but to each their own. Light exposure and sun exposure. These two should go hand in hand with the movement piece because if you get your steps in outdoors, you're pretty much good to go here. Specifically on the sun exposure front, vitamin D synthesis is far more effective on the torso. So pop that top off every chance you get and don't fear the sun. Not getting enough sun exposure is just as harmful as getting too much. They're both stressors. So make sure you do get some time in the sun. The actual amount of time is going to vary based on your complexion, but every human needs sun exposure. Alcohol and drugs, use these at your own risk. They definitely compromise the immune system and they often have downstream effects that make things worse. So for example, alcohol impacts sleep quality in a big way, so there's a compounding effect here, unfortunately. But again, if you button up your nutrition, movement, and sleep, you're going to be able to buffer the negative effects of moderate alcohol intake a lot easier because you're not spending a bunch of your budget on cleaning up poor nutrition, movement, and sleep behaviors. Also, keep in mind that over-the-counter drugs like Advil, ibuprofen, Tylenol, allergy drugs like Claritin, Benadryl, all this stuff has a cost. I think that in general, we're far too fast and loose with over-the-counter drugs like this. They're not quote unquote free because everything in biology has a trade-off. If you have a headache and you're going to use a drug to get rid of it, there's a price your body has to pay for that. Your liver has to break those chemicals down. So just keep that concept in mind that nothing is free in biology. Everything has trade-offs. Socialize. So staying connected with folks is massively important to overall health. And I honestly don't think I need to go into details here or examples because this COVID-19 situation has brought the importance of this to the surface like never before. So in short, hang out with people you love. Now, the real take home around optimizing your immune health is focusing on the staples as opposed to supplementing a shitty lifestyle with a random green juice here and there or some over-the-counter supplements. So essentially the boring and mundane things, the day-to-day consistency is what's going to give you the best results. It's unfortunate, but it's true. Now, if you're interested in personalized one-on-one nutritional coaching and or workout design with me, you can head over to n1fitness.com/coaching or just click the link in the show notes below. Also, follow me up on Instagram at N1Fitness and friend me on Facebook at Marcus Sadu. I hope you found this episode useful and stay safe out there. Thanks for listening, and I will catch you on the next one. See ya.